Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. Joining me today, Christian Page, my colleague, and my good buddy. Christian, how we doing, brother?
Doing well. Glad it's Friday. That means football starts off early. We got some good games early on Saturday morning for sure.
Yes. And we got football on right now. Indiana, Minnesota, Miami, and Boston College. So just, these are the games that I like to watch just simply because there's, they're not like top-ranked teams, but they're very talented. Just it's good football, I think. Miami's very talented. We know that, but also being that it is Friday, I will say it's time for one of these. Oh yeah, cold beer. If that was clear of what that was.
Oh, I definitely know that sound for sure.
Yes, I'm drinking a Rubaeus. It's a Founders.
I like Founders.
Yeah.
I'm down with Founders. I'm an IPA guy, so I appreciate Founders.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. I don't know. I mean, it's not like my go-to, but I'm more of just like a let me just drink beer and get wild kind of guy. I mean, Rubaeus is nice, and when you're talking football, I feel like this is very nice. I'm watching Minnesota and Indiana right now, and I've got to say, Minnesota's helmets are sick. The jerseys are sick, but like on the back it says Golden Gophers, and I just think that's dumb.
They don't have the sexiest nickname either, where you can own it on the back of your jersey. So it's like you got the swagger and the helmets and the uniforms, and then it's like, oh, we're the Golden Gophers. And no offense to PJ Fleck and those guys, but it's not the sexiest nickname out there.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked up and it just totally kind of caught my eye. I wasn't really paying attention to it earlier in the game, but then I just caught it and I was like, man, really? But that's Tyler Johnson just keeping up with 100 yards receiving every single game right now. So that's definitely a name to know. But anyways, we are totally going off schedule. Guys, welcome to the show. As always, this show is powered by Thrive Fantasy. If you are tired of your typical daily fantasy sports of where you stack your lineups, you're not winning any money, trust me, I do it all the time. I get frustrated. Well, you need to check out Thrive Fantasy. It is fantastic. It's a ton of sport prop bet stuff that you can handle with simple bets, simple pricing. It's very, very fun, and it's a great way to make a little bit of extra cash. Maybe you don't win the grand prize, but you are almost guaranteed to win every single time. You're guaranteed to thrive with Thrive Fantasy. So check it out today. bit.ly/Russ NFL Draft. Deposit $10 now. They will credit you $10 because you're using my Twitter handle name, and then you will be all set. You'll get $20 right off the rip, and you can spend this all throughout the weekend on the NFL, on college football, on the NBA, and whatever's left of the World Series. So check it out with Thrive Fantasy. Start thriving with daily fantasy sports. So, Christian, we are getting into week 8 of the NFL, week 9 of college football. We are starting to wind down to basically the final quarter of the year, if you will, the final month of college football, and it's really kind of shaping up to be. Michigan's in the top 5 right now. A lot can happen. I feel like last year at this time we were kind of like, okay, we kind of know who's going to be where. I feel like Clemson and Alabama, we know what we're going to see. But, I mean, things are really shaping up right now, and it's I feel like just wide open. Am I wrong for thinking that, or is it really wide open?
No, you're definitely right. And with Notre Dame being successful this year and looking at their schedule, assuming they probably run the table, then that throws a whole new wrench into the playoff rankings that come out Tuesday. And so it'll be interesting. And Russ, you and I were talking before, the Florida-Georgia game, believe it or not, in the preseason, we were not probably talking about this game being a playoff implication for the winner. And that pretty much eliminates one of those teams from the playoff. And then the winner is actually in the driver's seat there. And so you're looking at, you think Clemson and Florida State, that would have been more of a playoff entry game coming in. They're going to play at noon tomorrow. But obviously Clemson has the easier schedule now. The ACC not as strong as usual. And so Clemson and Alabama, like you said, I feel like those are the two outliers in a good way. But the Michigan and then Ohio State, are they out of it? Are they going to come to a situation like last year where, they're going to plead their playoff case, but they drop a game by 30 plus points to Iowa last year, and they do the same to Purdue, and they're not looking like a good team because the playoff does a lot by the eye test. So it definitely is wide open. And of course, Texas and Oklahoma is going to be a conversation. And don't even forget about West Virginia, even though they lost to Iowa State a couple weeks ago. So still a lot of football to be played, and it's fun to have this kind of talk, going into week 8, week 9, because that means every single Saturday is even more important. And I know that sounds cliche, but that just makes college football Saturday so much more exciting.
No, it really does. And I mean, there's even LSU in there at number 4 that I feel like really nobody's talking about. And I feel like they're a team that we have a hard time like pinpointing what they are, because they've got some very talented players on that team. I mean, Grant Delpit probably is the number 1 guy just overall on that roster, who is just, man, he is so instinctive. He's got a lot of range. He's versatile. I love what he does. He checks off a lot of the boxes. But then Nick Brossette, the running back, he really turned my head earlier in the year, especially against Miami. What's your takes, I mean, as an SEC guy, on LSU? I mean, I love all the guys all the teams that we're talking about, from Bama to Georgia to Texas. But LSU, I mean, is this a for real team at 4, or are they going to hit a hiccup here and maybe lose 2 or 3 more games?
I mean, I want to say they're a for real team because every time we question them, they're proving us wrong. I mean, getting that Georgia victory and pretty much dominating Georgia. And I know the score may indicate a little bit different, but when you have Joe Burrow, the Ohio State transfer, who is not a attractive quarterback when you put all the numbers and just the skill set together, but he gets the job done. And that's all LSU's been really lacking over the years, is just kind of have that game manager at quarterback. And it seems like Joe Burrow is that guy. And kind of surprising, Nick Brossette at running back, like we talked about, he surprised me because he's kind of played to that workhorse mentality where I think that he's an LSU running back. That's what they thrive off. Of course, we know their defense is going to be good. I mean, I think you can make the case that they have the best position with Devin White at linebacker, Greedy Williams at corner, and now Grant Delpit's coming, into his own. So I think they have 3 players that are the best at their individual positions. That definitely helps a lot when you have some offensive struggles, but LSU, I mean, they're scoring 30 points a game, which is almost an anomaly compared to years past. So I think they're the real deal for now. And I mean, we'll definitely tell next week when they take on Alabama, because they always seem to give Alabama a good game, but they can't really do anything on offense. This year, that may not be the case. Maybe they can make a few big plays to make the game really interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, I like watching their team, especially Nick Brossette. I mean, he's a lot of fun to watch. Again, he was a guy that earlier into the season really turned my head, and I was like, wow, man, this guy is very talented. It's amazing at how they just produce running backs there, from Leonard Fournette and now to Nick Brossette. So it's really amazing to see. Also Darius Geis. But a team that I really like just in the top 10, and maybe it's because it's the only team left standing in my Final Four to start the year, because my Final Four was, Miami, Florida, Stanford, Michigan State. Had to be a homer, I know, and I'm such a sellout. And then the Texas Longhorns. I mean, I thought just I previewed that defense going into the season. I really liked what I saw. PJ Locke, Deonta Davis, Charles Menahu, if I'm saying that right or wrong, or Menawa, something like that. Gary Johnson at linebacker, Chris Boyd, the corner. There's just so many names and so much talent there that I'm just so impressed with them at 6-1. And I know, they've got a tough game coming up this weekend against Oklahoma State because they're at OK State. It's a night game that I just always feels like could play a part in things. Then you've got West Virginia, you've got Texas Tech, and you do have Iowa State. They should roll through Kansas as their last game, but Iowa State's always just that team I feel that can play upset. And I liked Iowa State a little bit going into this season as well. So I like Texas a lot at 6. Where are you with them? We'll move forward after this, but where are you with them as they sit at 6?
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan too, and I feel like this is the year where they can carve up something in the Big 12. They got the big hurdle out of the way with Oklahoma. And, if Sam Ehlinger is healthy at quarterback going forward, I mean, I think this team is definitely in the driver's seat in the Big 12. Got West Virginia a couple weeks, I believe. But, I mean, this seems like the Tom Herman team that we all envision, that he envisioned. I know the quarterback may not be up to his liking. I know he's still working on getting everybody into his program and buying into what he's doing. But, I mean, you naming all those players, those are legitimate NFL players. Chris Boyd being one of the main ones, and Colin Johnson at receivers, one of my favorite big play guys. Been a highlight reel in college football. At 6'5", 210 pounds, just a big body, athletic guy. Go get it, throw it up, and I'll go get it type mentality. So there's so many things clicking for Texas. And I know last week, they won by a touchdown to Baylor, and I know they haven't had the best strength of schedule, but getting wins over TCU and USC, those are hard-nosed teams, and they have talent. So I don't care if those teams haven't lived up to expectations. That shouldn't say much about this Texas team based on those other teams' resume, because Texas is doing everything that they're supposed to be doing right now. And we pretty much forget about that Maryland loss because it was so far long ago. And I think this Texas team has improved so much from a resume and just a team chemistry level that this team really looks like a legitimate top 5 team. It'll be very interesting to see if they beat Oklahoma State this weekend, to see where the playoff committee has them on Tuesday.
No doubt about it. And I think one of the big things is, they've got these players defensively that we're talking about, Colin Johnson, Little Jordan Humphrey, which is a fantastic. It's great. But 2 receivers right there with over 500 yards receiving, 9 total combined touchdowns, over 80 receptions combined between them. One of the biggest things, though, that I think has helped this team is just identifying themselves running the football. And I love that they were feeding the ball to Trey Watson, the senior running back, but I've got to say, feed the ball to their freshman, Keontae Ingram. Every single time he's had double-digit carries in a game, he's had over 60 yards rushing. Now, he hasn't scored a touchdown in 4 weeks, but I think that'll change against OK State. But, last game against Baylor, he had over 100 yards rushing, almost 20 carries. At Oklahoma, he had 86 yards on the ground. At K-State, he had 68 yards on the ground. And so every single time he's got double-digit carries, he's being productive. He's averaging, 6.1 yards per carry, which is, I feel like it's pretty common for guys in college to average 5-6 yards per carry. But this guy's doing it as a freshman. He's only going to get better. Keep giving him the football. Keep giving him that experience. It's only going to help Tom Herman. It's only going to help this offense. So I think that's something that's been really key for them. And as they get to this home stretch, the final 4 or 5 games of the season, I think they need to continue to do that. And I hope that they do, because I'm a big fan of what I've seen from Keontae Ingram anyways. But moving forward, we want to get into the schedule for Week 9 in some of the games that we're paying attention to. We talked a bit about it before the show, but I want to get more into detail on it now. What are some games that you're looking at for Week 9 that you're going to be paying attention to tomorrow, especially now, as you said, Auburn's on a bye?
Yeah, so that definitely means, because my regular day job is covering Auburn for the radio, so that of course means every Auburn football game, home or away, 95% of the time I'm going to be there, so I'll miss a lot of good football. So I'm excited that I get to wake up and sleep in a little bit and watch some football early. And Russ and I were talking, right before we got on, that Clemson and Florida State, Wisconsin and Northwestern right off the bat at 11 o'clock my time, 12 Eastern. And then I think Clemson and Florida State, yes, Florida State is not the team that I guess that maybe some people thought they would struggle a little bit this year. Willie Taggart year 1, and they definitely gotten better, but they're still struggling. But from a prospect perspective, I still think, they're still Florida State at the end of the day. I think the matchup you look forward to in that one is to see where Mitch Hyatt is, the left tackle out of Clemson, is right now, because he was a guy that he came in as a 5-star recruit, one of the best prospects in high school football when he enrolled at Clemson, but he hasn't, to me, lived up to that potential. I know he has athletic feet, but it seems like technique-wise, he's not there. It just seems like he's a step too slow, whether literally or figuratively in that matter, of really sealing that edge. And then sometimes he'll blow you away and show you some athleticism, but I think he's better in pass protection than he's run blocking, which is kind of different because normally it's right the opposite. But seeing him battle against Brian Burns, one of the sexier draft guys that really the draft media has caught up to this year, number 99 for Florida State. He has been outstanding this year. He has really good length. I know he's a little on the slender end that a lot of people that might push him off the radar in the first round, but the guy gets after the football. He is very smart with his pass toolkit, and I think that's one of the bigger matchups from a draft perspective, not only in this game, but in all of college football on Saturday.
I'm with you, man. I mean, I'll pay attention to the game. I probably will be watching it recording and everything else because I've got a wedding to go to, and Michigan State, the dreadful Spartans, are going to be playing Purdue, which is going to be a barn burner. It's going to be a great game. Can't wait. So I'll watch, probably a quarter of that before I have to go and watch some friends get married. But one name I'm really interested in watching with Florida State, and I'm glad you talked about Brian Burns. His, the weight kind of scares me, but that I think he'll check out just fine. He's athletic. He's got the length. He's explosive. He's just a freak athlete. But one name that really stands out to me for Florida State is their wide receiver, Nyqwan Murray. 35 receptions, almost 500 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. He's kind of a guy that's maybe slipped under the radar for wide receivers. And maybe he's a guy that's just similar to like Travis Rudolph from 2 years ago for them. But he's a guy that I just think has a lot of, I don't want to say upside, but he's got the quick feet. I think he does well working along the sideline, along the middle of the field. And he's a guy that I think has helped this team turn around from their dreadful start, get to 4-3, which I think is a nice job by this team because they were just so bad to start the season. But, you've got DeAndre Francois, who's I think played relatively well this year, coming back from an injury. So I'm excited to watch this Florida State offense, even though there's probably a good chance that Clemson does exactly what they did to NC State, which is, man, unfortunate for my boy Ryan Finley. But Clemson, they've got a ton of prospects as well. Trey Lamar is one of my personal favorites at linebacker. Their defensive line is freakishly good, as we know. And like you said Mitch Hyatt at offensive tackle. So that's going to be a fun matchup and seeing what he does. So there's a lot to go with on that. But a game that I'll be paying attention to just from that time slot at 12 p.m. Eastern time is Wisconsin and Northwestern. Two of my favorite linebackers, maybe not my favorite, but just two linebackers that really need to be talked about maybe a little bit more or maybe a little bit less. Patty Fisher from Northwestern, TJ Edwards from Wisconsin. I don't think that these guys are first-round talents by any mean, but I think that these are mid-round guys, day 2, day 3 picks that bring some value to the linebacker position. I think they deepen the position, they add some depth to it, and this is actually a surprising battle that's got some Big Ten championship implications on it. I don't think people really realize that, but the Big Ten West has got Northwestern at 4-1 in the conference, 4-3 overall. Wisconsin's 5-2 overall, 3-1 in the conference. So if Wisconsin loses, essentially whoever loses this game is probably not in the running anymore to go to Indianapolis to play for the Big Ten championship. Now, Northwestern, they've got quite the stretch here. Odds are they're going to mess this whole thing up. They've got Wisconsin, Notre Dame, and they've got to go to Iowa, plus at Minnesota. So odds are they're going to lose 2 out of their next 4 games. Which ones it's going to be, I don't know. But from a prospect standpoint, Patty Fisher, the linebacker for Northwestern, TJ Edwards, the linebacker for Wisconsin, those are 2 guys that I'm watching for in this game.
Yeah, I think so too. And like you said, they're probably not oozing with first-round talent, but I don't want to sound too cliche, but they are your typical instinctive style of linebackers, and that's something that, I mean, you got a lot of value in that. And sure, they're not going to go out here and run a 4.65 40 or anything like that, but I think just having them play, and maybe it's just something with me and Big Ten linebackers, it just feels like it comes with that cerebral mentality of that they play so sound and so smart football. And both of those guys have that. I mean, TJ Edwards seems like one of the more household names at Wisconsin, and you have to think if Wisconsin's going to rebound this season, especially on defense, he's going to be one of the bigger reasons. And then, too, with Northwestern, a lot of the preseason draft hype was swirling around Clayton Thorson at quarterback, and we know his struggles and then some injury issues with him. But then Patty Fisher, seeing him come out there, and I know, in the draft media he was well known, but it's good to hear him now being one of the more household names when you're looking at the linebacker class, which I haven't studied it deeply yet, but it probably isn't a crazy deep linebacker class. But those are 2 guys that definitely should be at the top of the list when that all comes to be in April.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think that these guys are even the best linebackers in the Big Ten. I think, and maybe I'm just a homer, but Joe Bocci,
You,
linebacker for Michigan
you
State.
called him a few weeks ago. It was like the beginning of the year, so I still have the text message. So I
Yeah,
got you that one.
yeah, that's going to be held accountable, and I'll probably go to that. What's it? Old Takes Exposed or whatever
Yeah,
that Twitter
I won't
handle
set
is.
you up in that way.
Oh, appreciate it. But TJ Edwards, he kind of reminds me, and I don't like doing pro comps. I'm a guy that I stand by, let the guy be who he is. But if I had to watch a guy and say, okay, he reminds me of this player at the next level, reminds me a little bit of Kyle Van Noy in a sense. Not super athletic, but he's a guy that maybe just has some length, and he can, I think, just play well in the middle, maybe more so as like a rat defender in coverage, probably going to blitz him a lot more. And Kyle Van Noy really hasn't panned out as much as teams thought. So I don't know. Maybe TJ Edwards is a future Detroit Lion, and I'm just comparing the two because Kyle Van Noy went to New England, has actually done better there than he did in Detroit. And with Matt Patricia, maybe he can make the whole thing happen. Maybe that's what I'm hopeful for. But another game that I'm focusing on, Texas OK State, like I mentioned earlier in the show. I love the defense. I love the players that they have defensively at Texas. Justice Hill, the running back for OK State, he's definitely a name to pay attention to. I think very good balance off tackles and things like that he does. He does a really good job in short areas. I've been impressed with him. Is there another game, or do you want to piggyback off that game? Is there another game that you're really paying attention to?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that one first because I think Justice Hill gets a lot of the praise for his highlight reel based on just being a speed guy and having that quickness. But let's not forget, the guy is a true running back and he can run between the tackles. And sure, he may not be at the height weight threshold that a lot of NFL teams will value, but he has that ability to read things. He has the vision and the patience to create things himself in between the tackles and set up blocks. So he definitely is a true running back, in my opinion. And that's not going against anything that you say, but I know the perception of him is more of just the speed guy. Let's get him out to the perimeter and see what he can do, which, yes, is his bread and butter for that matter, but he is still a true running back and can play that primary role in between the tackles, at least at the college football level.
No doubt. Now, is there another game? I mean, I know where you had another one as well later in the game, or later in the day, I mean.
Yeah, well, of course, in SEC country, Florida and Georgia is the big one, and they call it the biggest outdoor cocktail party in the country. So that's definitely something that has a lot of playoff implications on it. And, I think Martez Ivey and this Florida offensive line, it's not my favorite. Ivey's gotten a little better, but I think he's better if you kick him inside at guard. But he struggled to me, and between him and Mitch Hyatt, two of the bigger recruits coming out in their respective recruiting year out of high school, they've fallen well short of the mark for me. And I just don't know what it is. It just seems like with Ivey, there's a lapse in kind of intelligence on the field. I don't know his football IQ. It just seems like he's overwhelmed by a lot of things. And he played at a pretty large high school in Florida, so it's not something that he's used to not seeing these SEC quality athletes because he probably played against them even in practice. So he's somebody I'm looking forward to watching because we know Georgia will have those guys locked and loaded. Kirby Smart will throw everything at Felipe Franks at quarterback for Florida because we know he can struggle under pressure. But I think if you look at Van Jefferson, Florida wide receiver, transferred from Ole Miss last year, got the waiver to transfer without penalty. He's a guy that I think needs to take the next stride forward because he has the athleticism. He has the intelligence of a route runner to really be something special in that offense. Sure, is he limited based on the offense and Felipe Franks? Yeah, I think you could say that. But seeing him battle against DeAndre Baker or whoever he'll be matched up against that in that Georgia secondary, I think is very key. But there is a ton of pro prospects in this game. Some of the more underrated guys, too. I know J.R. Reed's a safety out there that some people haven't talked about. DeAndre Walker for Georgia, one of those jack linebackers that Nick Saban and Kirby Smart like to use. And, of course, that whole Florida defensive line is definitely making strides week by week to really form an NFL caliber defensive line. Of course, we already talked about Ja'Kai Polite at length before, so I won't go too much far into that. But I think there's a lot of guys on this Florida and Georgia defense that will definitely be playing on Sunday here soon.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, both of those teams always produce a ton of talent. Florida, maybe not so much as of late, but they're definitely, I think, on the come up, if you will. They're turning that thing around. And this is going to actually make me jump into our Twitter question that we got from good buddy Nick Martin, which you can find him on Twitter at the McNarton.
I don't know do you know the backstory on his Twitter handle?
I think he just did it as I don't know. I think he just did it as kind of like fun. Or maybe the Nick Martin was taken or something.
That's true.
I did ask him. I can't remember. It feels like years ago now, but I can't remember. But I think it was something like along the lines that his actual name was taken. But I asked for some questions on Twitter. He reached out. He said, "What are your guys' sleeper prospects who aren't getting enough tension yet?" And I mean, I don't think this guy is necessarily a prospect for 2019 yet, but LaMichael Trine, and since you're talking Florida and Georgia,
I am so happy you mentioned him because I really had him written down.
Yeah, I've got him right here.
I'm so excited.
I am really impressed with him. And throughout the early parts of the year, like against Tennessee, dreadful Tennessee, he had 6 carries for 16 yards. Against Charleston Southern, he had 2 carries for 28 yards. Kentucky, only 4 carries for 34 yards. There's some of these games where he's getting 8 yards, 14 yards per carry. But against Mississippi State, LSU, Vanderbilt, he's had the ball double-digit times, and he's averaged well over 5 yards per carry, plus 3 touchdowns. They're finally using him again. I've been very impressed with him between the tackles, type of runner. I think this is a guy that really good contact balance. I am liking what I see with Trine. Now, I don't know if he comes out or if he stays. I don't exactly know. I mean, he's a native apparently of Mobile, Alabama, so maybe going to the Senior Bowl is kind of his goal. So maybe staying for a senior year, going to the Senior Bowl, doing those types of things, maybe that's something he needs to do or wants to do. I don't know. I know guys always have different goals and agendas, but he's a sleeper, I think, that just doesn't get enough attention, especially in this running back class. He could essentially be like an undrafted guy and maybe turns into a Phillip Lindsay, if you will. But what do you got on Trine?
Yeah, I like him a lot too. And it's funny because I was thinking about that game and seeing Jordan Scarlett come back, after the weird suspension last year, that credit card and Antonio Callaway stuff. Jordan Scarlett, the main running back, was part of that as well. So, and along with 7 or 8 other Florida players. So it's good to see Scarlett back on there and doing his thing. But yeah, with Trine only a junior, I think if he stayed another year and actually had that primary running back role, he could definitely be a guy coming into the year on the radars, because I think this year, that's his issue, is that he came in not really as the guy, just another guy. I think entering next year, he could be the guy at Florida, and then just have a spotlight on him coming into the year. But I actually, when I did my preliminary grades for the SEC coming into the year, I actually graded LaMichael Trine higher than Jordan Scarlett. More, I mean, yes, you have to factor in the off-field stuff for Scarlett, and that, of course, knocks him down a few rounds because it's more serious trends than it is just a fluke incident. But with Trine, like you said, I love the physical play and the balance that comes with that. And maybe it's just something with the name. I don't know the relationship between Samaje and LaMichael, but maybe it's something with your cousin. Okay, so there we go. Something with the contact balance of playing that physical demeanor and really accentuating on that and playing, to the second level of the defense. He's definitely been impressive the few times he's gotten the ball, but like you said, when he has the heavy helping of carries, he's doing a lot what he can get. Yeah, no, and I've liked what I've seen. I mean, it's a smaller sample size compared to other running backs, but I think that's probably part of the question as well. I mean, they're a sleeper for a reason. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Bryce Love, but Trine, again, I like what I've seen from him. It'll be interesting. They're both juniors, him and Scarlett, so it'll be interesting to see who declares, who maybe stays. I'm hoping Scarlett declares and Trine stays, so we get a full year, like you said, of him being that number one guy. But is there another guy that you have? I have one, but I'll wait because it kind of my segue into maybe the final segment of the show. See, I was just scrolling through Twitter and just seeing, because when sleeper, it's like you want to target somebody that's not being talked about enough or plays at a smaller school and that, it deserves some first or at least top 50 praise. And I feel like a lot of guys are actually ranked pretty appropriately at this point because a lot of people are down on the quarterbacks. And I mean, rightly so. None of them have really played that well. But a guy that I think I'm going to say a sleeper for the first round. How about that? Because it's hard to really dig deep at this time before you get a heavy helping of everybody. And I know Jaylon Ferguson of Louisiana Tech has been a pretty hot name if you go for the smaller schools, so to speak, with Louisiana Tech. But he's a guy I think that could slip into the first round talks because on every single game he's had an opportunity to shine. He had a huge game versus LSU, and he just plays with an SEC-type mentality playing against a team like LSU, frustrating multiple times on both sides of the line, on the left and right side, the offensive tackles. He was just overwhelming them with power and quickness. He's not the most flexible guy. He's not the most athletic guy, which I guess we'll see when the combine speeds and times start coming out. But his technical ability, especially with his hands, is awesome. And it's something like it's almost textbook worthy because he will sit there and constantly move his legs and be on par with moving his hands. Frustrating guys because even if you don't have all this torque and powerful ability, even though he has shown that, you can still get pressure on the quarterback if you can use your hands in a creative way to put pressure in the backfield. And he has that down to an art. So I know we've talked about pass rushers, and it's a very, very, good class this year. And maybe that will force, a lot of teams to freak out and draft some pass rushers. So maybe if you're looking at that first, second round range, top 50 picks, I think Jaylon Ferguson's going to be a guy that you're glad you picked somebody else of need in the first round, and then you're settling for Jaylon Ferguson because I think he'd make a lot of people happy in that day 2 range.
Christian, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at numbers right now on him, and I'm just grinning, and the wheel in my head is spinning, and I'm just like, man, I know what I'm doing when we get done with this podcast. This guy, 9.5 sacks on the year, 11.5 tackles for loss. That's just this year as a senior. 7 sacks last year with 12.5 tackles for loss. 14.5 sacks the year before that. So altogether, 53 tackles for loss, 37 sacks throughout his career. He's still got 5 more games to go. Is this going to be a Senior Bowl guy?
Oh, I sure hope so. It better be. And when I spot him, when we're down there and I spot him, I won't even have to say anything. You'll know exactly who I'm talking about if he's there.
I look forward to it. Jaylon Ferguson, name to know, definitely. This is a good catch. 6'5", 262, listed on sportsreference.com. Check that website out. I'll give them a free little advertisement here. Sportsreference.com.
Absolutely, they deserve it.
Yeah, they do great work always. The guy that I'm going to talk about, I've talked about before. I'll talk about him again because I want to kind of introduce a quarterback watch type of thing where we pay attention to these quarterbacks maybe on a weekly basis here on out, because I feel like the quarterback class is just so uncertain right now. But the guy that I like that maybe doesn't get enough buzz is Manny Wilkins, Arizona State quarterback. He's got a big matchup against USC this weekend. And I've just been – I don't know, like, how to explain how, like, I feel about, like, him, the prospect, because he was a big part of to why, they beat Michigan State. But he has just been, I think, lights out on the year. I know he's got, some fantastic weapons. Kyle Williams, N'Keal Harry, Eno Benjamin running out of the backfield has been fantastic for Arizona State. But Manny Wilkins, man, he's just I don't like using the term gunslinger, but he can sling that ball around, and he's got great arm strength. He moves and maneuvers well into the pocket, extends beyond the pocket. And I think there's times that he gets caught up in his reads sometimes, not going through his full progressions. But he's certainly in this quarterback class, when we talk about the Jared Stidhams, the Justin Herberts, the Ryan Finleys, if Herbert stays, if Dwayne Haskins stays, who over the last month, Dwayne Haskins has gotten a ton of buzz as a quarterback in this class. Daniel Jones, I think, has maybe been the guy that's risen the most going from, July to now. I think he's gained probably the most round one buzz, and he seems like a guy that's probably destined to go somewhere in there. I just because of the premium at quarterback and any teams that need a quarterback. But Manny Wilkins is a guy that should definitely get some consideration, not for round one, but just day 2, talk all day long. Have you watched Manny Wilkins at all for Arizona State?
I have a little bit, and I definitely watched last week when they were playing Stanford, and I was convinced, that this guy could be. He has the tools to be formed into an NFL quarterback, and I mean his 11-2 touchdown, the interception ratio definitely helps. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that I think, and I know this sounds very vague, but he seems like he gets it and whatever it is, but he feels like he's one of those guys that can sit there and read a defense, and I know he still has a lot more to gain in that regard. But he can sit there. He knows how to handle pressure. He has enough athleticism to deal with that. But I think if there's more consistency there, I agree with you. I know we've talked about him in the past, and you've convinced me for sure. But I think there's definitely a lot of wiggle room in this quarterback class because nobody has really taken the cake so far. And I know Justin Herbert is the guy, but it's kind of by default in a sense because he could look a lot better. I mean, he's looked fine, but he could look a lot better. Drew Lock's kind of in the same boat. We like to see little, we'll stack little traits with him that could make him into a prototypical quarterback. But he's also had his struggles. Of course, we've seen Jarrett Stidham, fall flat this year. And I know your guy, Brian Lewerke, hasn't done that well anyways. But I think you're seeing guys like Daniel Jones, coming back from injury at Duke, taking that next step. And Manny Wilkins is another guy. And, of course, there are some other names out there that you could put on that list. But there's definitely Manny Wilkins is one of those guys that I believe is taking advantage of that vacancy right now, at least in that top 5, top 6 range of quarterbacks. Yes, he still has a little bit to go, but I think there's enough there that will intrigue a lot of quarterback coaches at the next level that could get them to pull the trigger maybe earlier than a lot of people expect.
Yeah, no doubt. And I will say, Brian Lewerke, big disappointment this year. He's been a bigger disappointment than Jarrett Stidham, hands down. I don't care what anybody says. And he needs to stay. He needs to come back. He should not go pro. He should definitely stay because he's just – I don't care what people say about the weapons of, Cam Chambers let a ball come right off his hands. It got picked off, this and that. I don't want to hear any of that. Against Michigan, he was throwing passes at people's feet. He was instantly going for a corner route and just throwing it into the stands. I mean, there was no control whatsoever. He has just been dreadful this entire season. And sure, he led them down the field for a great drive against Penn State, but Felton Davis was a big part of that success. He tore his Achilles right off the rip on a route against Michigan, and he only scored because the Penn State cornerback fell down. So it doesn't even matter. Brian Lewerke sucked up until that point of the game. I don't care. He should not go pro. He should not even be talked about on this list, and he's not going to get talked about on this list. Daniel Jones has done the most for himself for Duke. Coming back from an injury like that, I think is fantastic. I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying that's what that guy is, but seeing Aaron Rodgers come back, when he was playing the Bears, basically tore his MCL, comes back, after the half. That's putting your balls on the table and saying, hey, look at me. Daniel Jones broke his clavicle and had surgery done. 2 weeks later, he's playing again and throwing a football. I mean, that's putting your stones on the table and saying, hey, look at me, guys. I'm a potential first-round quarterback, and I think he's got the potential to do it. He caught my eye last year, and he's been much better this year than he was last year. Ryan Finley, he's been a letdown this year as far as some of the key games, like against Clemson, against Boston College. The last 2 weeks have been rough for him, but overall, I think he's a pro-style quarterback. I think out of all the QBs, he's the most pro-ready. Justin Herbert, he's another one of those guys that he's got probably the most in the toolbox. He's got the most in the shed. He's got everything that's there, but it's just there's times that he is missing throws. There's times that he's not going through progressions. There's times that he's not extending plays beyond the pocket. So there's definitely room to grow, but he is a very talented quarterback. I still think he's very, very good. Drew Lock against Kentucky this weekend. I'm excited to see what he does against a team that's ranked 12th in the country rather than a Alabama where they got slaughtered.
Yeah, but Kentucky's defense, they are no slouch whatsoever.
Oh, no, yeah. No, I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, I'm just saying, this is a good matchup, whereas
right.
It's not the Alabama of the world. It is a Kentucky where they could maybe have a little bit more of a letdown, or if they lose, their Josh Allen or they lose another player, maybe the depth isn't as much as there is with an Alabama where it's constant just a powerhouse after powerhouse, and stuff like that. But one thing I will say about Manny Wilkins, and then I think we'll kind of close it out, but one thing I think that's going to help Manny Wilkins is, and again, I'm not an NFL scout. I don't know what these guys do as far as what boxes they check and everything else. And maybe I should go to the scouting academy and learn these things. But I will say having Herm Edwards as his head coach right now, I think is going to help him a ton, because I think he's a potential guy that we see in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I think he's potentially a guy that we talk about more after the season. But having a guy like Herm Edwards, a former pro coach, a guy that knows what it's like at the college level. He's being successful there, but he knows what it's like to be successful at the pro level. I just think that connection is going to do him wonders. I thought Herm Edwards is going to be way outdated, didn't coach college football since 1989, hasn't coached at all since like 2008 or whatever, but he's done a wonderful job with the players that he has. He's made Eno Benjamin look fantastic compared to Kalen Ballage last year. And again, Manny Wilkins has taken a huge step in the right direction. So I'm excited to see what he does against USC. I think he's got a lot of pro potential. So is there anything else that you would like to add to the show, or any other sleepers that you have, or anything else at all?
I think we're good. One of the more interesting betting lines, I feel like, though, you mentioned the Missouri-Kentucky. Even though Kentucky's ranked 12th in the country and Missouri's unranked, Missouri's a 7-point home favorite. I just found that incredibly odd. So that will be interesting now, because even more pressure on Locke, just from a betting standpoint too, because now you're favored, and you're playing at home. So there's really no excuses, because I think a lot of teams teams and evaluators can kind of pardon his performance a little bit from Alabama, which he didn't look horrible. Like, there were some glimpses where you could take away and be like, oh, that was really, give kudos there. But I think in this game, a team like Kentucky, which, like we said, they have potential NFL players on the defense, but still a team that you shouldn't struggle mightily with. And I know a lot of people respect Kentucky and Mark Stoops from the defensive side of the ball, but it's definitely a key game for Drew Lock. And I feel like each week we talk about how Drew Lock can improve, and it doesn't seem like he's really answered the call, because I just feel like there's still a gaping hole there for QB number 2. And Will Grier looks to be right there in that spot right now, but I'm still not 100% sold on him as well. So Drew Lock still has a lot of football left to be played, but I think if he can really do something good against Kentucky, that will definitely turn some heads and maybe solidify a ranking for a few folks.
No doubt. If you want to make a bet on that game, like I mentioned, as always, Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast, is powered by Thrive Fantasy. So if you want to make some bets on some of these games, all you got to do is check out Thrive Fantasy. So, Christian, where can we follow you on Twitter, my man?
@_Christian Page, and going with Mick Narton. I understand the Twitter handle fiasco, because there's a guy with @Christian Page, just all one word, that hasn't tweeted like in 5 years and has 2 tweets. So I understand the frustrations.
Oh man, they should just totally ban that guy from Twitter and let you have your name. But I trust me, I get it as well. I couldn't be Russell Brown. I had to be Russell_Brown 51 for a long time. And then I finally was like, oh, I'll do Russ NFL Draft. And here we are. So be sure to smash the follow buttons @_Christian Page, @Russ NFL Draft. Guys, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. We will be back next week with all the results, more prospects, and everything else that you need for the NFL Draft. So keep it covered right here with Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.